Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Data and AI Live. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. Much appreciated. Today, we're going to be speaking with Michael Drexler about middle market private equity and AI, and I'll bring Michael in shortly and let him introduce himself. Couple of quick things just for housekeeping before we get going. Firstly, we are live and interactive, so which is exciting. But what that can mean is sometimes things do go wrong when you're live. So if anything goes wrong in terms of signal, we get cut off. Bear with us. We'll endeavour to get back on the live as quickly as possible. I've had cleaners walk in before while I was speaking as well, so all part of the fun, and just bear with us. As I said, we're interactive as well, so you'll see down below on LinkedIn in the comments box, you can ask any questions that you like as we go through. If you think of questions or have questions, please ask them in the comments box at any time. We're going to have Michael and I are probably going to speak for about half an hour, and then at the end we'll have a specific Q&A. But that said, put your comments in the box at any time during the live, because we may take them as we go through if they're relevant, but if not, they'll be there for the Q&A at the end, and we'll endeavour to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, and I'll invite Michael in now. Good afternoon, Michael. How are you?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm very well.
Great stuff. Well, thanks again for doing this, and thanks for joining us. Much appreciated. Michael is an MD and Chief Strategy Officer at Brightstar Capital Partners. I'll let you do your own intro though, Michael, so I don't know if you want to sort of introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah, sure thing. Michael Drexler, as Jeremy mentioned, Chief Strategy Officer here at Brightstar Capital Partners. And by way of CV, but what's relevant for this conversation, started in life with a PhD and postdoc in applied math, followed by 4 years of a McKinsey, then about 10 years as head of corporate strategy at Barclays Investment and Wholesale Banking, including through the financial crisis. So that was lots of fun in the ringside seat. 7 years as head of financial and investors industries at the World Economic Forum, then back to the private sector, JP Morgan Asset Management, 2 years as global head of strategy and business transformation. And since about 6 years in the current role, so that makes a 25-year arc, which I worry makes me rather old and don't like it these days. And my current role is really a three-legged stool. It's making sense of the world and the industry. That's always good when you're head of strategy. The second leg is improving the GP, the fund manager, from an operational decision-making angle. And then the same thing for the portfolio companies together with our operating teams. And often my role is like that of a sweeper in a soccer team. If there's need in the defense, that's where I run. And there's need in the offense, that's where I run. And
A Beckenbauer.
Well, yeah, that was also a long time ago, and a fellow German. And because of all of this, there's quite a strong connection to AI, both at the fund manager and in the portcos for me. So very happy to talk about that.
Great, yeah, I'm very happy to have you here. And out of interest, why, after the career that you'd had, Michael, why private equity and why Brightstar?
Long-standing relationship, as many things with Brightstar. So during my time at the World Economic Forum, where I oversaw, among other verticals, private equity and their LPs and ecosystem, built a relationship with Andrew Weinberg, our founder, and as he spun up the business, stayed in touch, followed his journey, got very intrigued by it, and obviously was good enough for him to eventually bring me on. And like many things in life, relationship driven.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thanks for that intro. Really helpful. So let's get straight into it then, Michael, because the half hour will go very quickly. But Brightstar, as many people will know, is not a sort of tech-focused fund specifically. So tell us, where did Brightstar's AI journey begin then?
Yes, and let me give a little bit context for the audience. We're just celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. We got about 5 billion under management, have made 20 platform investments, 80 transactions overall across 3 funds to date, around 80 employees, and we're in the traditional middle market PE. That's where our roots are. Business between 5 and 150 million annual EBITDA, where there's a really strong operational value creation angle. That's what we're proud of. Hands-on, sleeves up, in the weeds. We like industrials, business services, financial services, service-side telecoms, locations that are often overlooked by other PE firms. I sometimes joke we love boring, and it's definitely not true for AI, but it's the company that's at an inflection point after 10 to 20 years. The founders, the management go, we're stuck in a rut here. We need a partner to keep growing. Obviously, capital helps. And by way of example, we own a car auction business with over 50 locations across 21 states, which is, depending on the day, number 2 and number 3 in the US. We own a trailer manufacturer with headquarters in Fort Wayne, Indiana, data center component remarketing firm in Austin, Texas. It's businesses you won't see in the headlines, but they're super solid, super exciting actually for us, and part of the backbone of our economy. And over the years, we looked at traditional machine learning with these businesses. Always fun if you try to predict your pricing, of course. But we found for many of them, the hurdle was just too big to move them to cloud, move their IT stack to what's needed for traditional machine learning models. And the moment ChatGPT hit, I knew the barriers to AI adoption would really come down dramatically. And that was the moment where AI really got democratized outside the data scientist community. We saw this was going to become unavoidable for value creation, and personally gave it a try. And in my area, 2 things I think I'm reasonably good at: strategy, of course, and coding. And even though I thought I was reasonably good at it, my productivity went up 5 times, and that's despite the many hallucinations that happened in the early days. And so we saw that other people in the firm saw it too. We leaned in, trained all of our staff in prompting, got the platform subscribed to, played with use cases, put, not necessarily in that sequence, actually first put an AI policy in place. And before we knew it, we'd built 35 AI agent ourselves, judging by conversations with peers and LPs and vendors were at the forefront of the industry. And now we have this beautiful edge of hardcore operators, which we've always had and which we're proud of, with people who can build AI. And for our part of private equity, we find that's very rare, but we're very pleased because it's really a continuation of our origin story. Roll your sleeves up, be good at the things you do, and obviously bring that value to your portfolio and your investors.
Yeah. And you said a moment ago about how years back, cloud digital transformations were more difficult. So what is it for, if there's other operators, value creation folks listening to this, what is it about the AI transformation that makes it maybe not easier, but a smoother, or gives an ability to be more successful than previous technology transformations?
Yeah, and we might have to caveat this one a little bit and maybe touch more a bit later on the studies that tell you that AI transformation is actually not easy to do, and 95% according to some fail. I draw this distinction between transformation and application. So wholesale transformation, that's change management, that's never easy, but the application is really easy. And you and I know this, I think many in the audience will know this too. You bring up ChatGPT, you ask it a question, it comes up with pretty decent answers. So that's the first bit. All you need is a web browser and a working internet line. If you then go a little further, for $20 a month, you can get the GPT Team or GPT Plus, or for a little more money, Enterprise. And you can spin up a custom GPT in probably half an hour, and it does a pretty decent job. It doesn't fully automate a workflow, but it'll be a bloody good assistant to whatever problem you're trying to point it towards. And so the cycle times have improved dramatically, the cost has improved dramatically. And so to play with it has become so much easier than, in comparison, set up a data lake, run a large predictive machine learning model, train the thing in Amazon Cloud or Microsoft Azure. Not something you and I could do easily, but with those modern AI tools, the barriers to adoption has just come down dramatically.
Yeah, yeah. I think the ability to play is something I've heard a few times, and yeah, spot on. So how do you, as a PE firm and someone leading this at Brightstar, how do you navigate the AI ecosystem out there? Because there's lots of vendors, whole host of solutions, many of whom claim amazing things. How do you navigate that landscape?
I will. It's a very good question, and I show my age again, but hopefully in a good way. It reminds me a little bit of the early days of the internet. There's lots of vendors, lots of excitement, lots of VC money going around, and as a consequence, lots of very enthusiastic salespeople with, I would say now, better scripts, partly because they probably use AI to write them. It's a very, very human thing. They promise a lot, not because they're evil, but partly they also often don't know the limitations of their technical platform. And again, going back to the dot-com days, there's a beautiful moment where Bluetooth came up and what's now known as Wi-Fi came up. And a lot of startups try to sell Bluetooth for data mesh networks. And the spoiler alert there was the physics was never going to work on it, but everyone believed in it fervently, of course, until they tried and it broke down under scale. And so we see some of the similar issues here, which again gets to my point. It's good when you know what you're doing, because then you can gently call them out and calibrate. Give you another little example. We just had a bake-off between 5 PE specialized vendors. And won't name names. All I will say is not one of the 5 in their proof of concept that we gave them to do didn't have a hallucination on the numbers. And obviously the numbers in PE are quite important. So the tools were very impressive in many ways, but none of them got the basics right. And that's part of those models. So as a consequence, we're very cautious about locking into a single vendor. And that would be also my advice to the audience. Think forward 2 to 3 years. Will that vendor still be around? Will they be a big part of the ecosystem? And also, will they introduce a single dependency on you that you then can't get out of? So again, referencing the large language models, we're playing both with Claude and OpenAI, have enterprise subscriptions. We see their performance swing dramatically. And I'm going to be a conspiracy theorist and say, it was interesting that Claude was very good about a month ago, which is when they were in a fundraising cycle. And OpenAI has now come back since, and you never quite know what the vendor is doing that you're subject to. And so I would say keep your options open, vet well, and then we did take an approach to build a lot ourselves. We think that's always a good thing, because at the very least you get smarter, and so you can be both ambitious but also realistic, and then you do it from a position of strength. And to give you and everyone an example, because we built our own analyzer for a thing called a SIM, a confidential information memorandum, so essentially a pitch book when a company tries to sell itself, we've built that ourselves. So we now don't need to rush to a vendor that offers one. If there is one out there that's much better than what we have, we can take it, but we always have that fallback. And so my advice would be, don't get FOMO, never a good thing in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely right. I think this area about how to navigate the AI ecosystem for private equity is something that I hear all the time. So I know folks we've got on the audience are probably going to have questions about this. So as I said at the start, Michael and I will be doing Q&A if required at the end. We're going to probably speak for another 15, 20 minutes. But if anyone listening has questions on this, I mean, we could probably speak for an hour purely on this topic alone, but for expediency, we're going to have to move on. So, but please, if you do have questions on this area, Michael's a great guy to give you some insight on that. So please do get them in the comments on LinkedIn down below, and we'll come to them. In terms of something we touched on before, what in terms of use cases at Brightstar and specific to Brightstar, what have you found useful?
So I'll start, and we're very democratic about this. Again, as I mentioned, we develop our own, and it's not just me, it's others in the firm as well, because we're all trained. And then we put them onto a portal where everyone literally can go on, hit a button. It's a little bit organized by job family. So finance have their own section, investment teams have their own section. You hit a button and an agent pops up. The fun one, because it's always a recursive world, is we do have an agent that generates prompts. So we're using AI to help us work with AI. That's part of the brave new world we now live in. We have, I'd like to highlight one that is very fun. It's called our Red Team agent. Basically, we put in an investment committee memo with an investment thesis, and it basically tries to challenge it, tries to play devil's advocate. We made that mandatory for IC reviews. It does a few things very well. Number one is it's a contrarian voice, so it helps us see more ideas than we would just by ourselves. It challenges whether the story is being spun, because it's good at picking up sentiment and language. That's what these models do. And also, we'll see this a few more times, I think, in our conversation. It's a machine. So when it says it doesn't like the deal, no one gets offended, because it's not the interpersonal dynamics. And, you know, if you and I, Jeremy, would be on the investment committee, you would present a deal that you worked 3 months on to get ready. And I go, yeah, but Jeremy, I'm not sure what I think of that. You'd go like, Michael, really, do you have to do this to me? But now, because it's not a human, it becomes a lot easier to stay at the factual level.
And we can stay friends.
Yes, exactly. And you can hate the computer, and that's great.
Yeah.
And so that intersection of, I'd say, content and psychology is something we find very interesting at Brightstar. A few more examples in a quick canter. We've got a tool that checks due diligence findings are actually reflected in the IC memo. Kind of the same idea. Don't sort of sweep things under the rug. Not that we'd ever do, but it's a human thing to sometimes forget things, and computers are good at checking that. We have one that assesses all dimensions of business risk against a proprietary framework. We got a briefing tool for management meetings. So in diligence, it makes sure that all the tough questions are being picked up from the diligence materials, but also then it goes online and looks at interviews with the management team historically, at articles, makes a psychological profile, and goes, so if the question is, we're not 100% sure about your growth projections, it then picks up the type of person the CEO might be from the public profile and goes, here's a good way of asking that person a question. They're a flamboyant entrepreneur, so you should pivot towards the vision of the growth rather than criticize them. They're a fact-based introvert, so you should quote some macro stats and say, help me understand how that either connects or disconnects with your growth. So the tool is very good at doing the psychology. And then we have the usual things. Again, these things are LLMs, so L, the second one for language. So compliance reviews, marketing, antitrust language, all the stuff that you spend a lot of money for legal review on, and it doesn't, big caveat, it never substitutes the legal review, never does. It also doesn't substitute human review in investment decisions, but it augments, it saves time, makes us more productive.
Yeah. So many of these tools are fascinating, and again, I think it will offer huge insight to our audience. I almost feel we could probably do episodes standalone on each tool to some extent, but we are shooting through at a high level. So forgive us everyone for that. But again, any specific questions, please put them in the comments at the end, and I'm sure Michael will happily take them. One of just to pick up on the sort of investment contrarian tool you mentioned, to what extent has that, I mean, I'd imagine, does that improve people within the organization as well, a tool like that? Because I guess it could make you more self-aware about your own investment biases.
That's totally right. And it also introduces a way of thinking that, again, the older ones of us, the partners and the MDs, we've sort of, I don't know, honed the craft for many decades. But if you're a young professional, obviously you lack that experience. And these tools all of a sudden give you a way of looking at the world, because of course you pre-train them, you preload them with some of the things that our more experienced professionals will look at. And all of a sudden that's available in a dialogue. And so we found it's a very helpful way for younger professionals to learn as well, to be coached. Still, person to person is the easiest, but there's only so many hours in the day. And for AI tools, it's very easy to pick that up and disseminate the knowledge and the way of thinking. So absolutely.
Yeah. You seem to have a sort of a philosophy of augmentation over automation, Michael. Is that fair? And I guess what other observations have you seen when working with AI?
Yeah, absolutely fair. And part of this is in my view, we're in the knowledge business. We're not making widgets as an investor, as a fund management. And at the margin, it doesn't really matter for my returns whether I have 39 or 41 investment professionals. The cost implications aren't that relevant, but the quality of our decisions is what matters. And so that's where I take any dollar and put it into making better decisions. And until we have what's known as AGI, the artificial general intelligence, augmentation of humans is the way forward over replacement of humans, because again, it can't, even the professional tools can't yet get the numbers right all the time. So substitution and automation will be a very dangerous game to play. I already touched on how easy it is to set up those agents, and therefore big shout out to the audience. Just play, have fun, have safe fun, put your guardrails around it, switch off the train other models, but do play. And then as somebody who writes both traditional code and now plays with AI, I found interacting with those platforms is very different. So in traditional code, it's a deterministic thing. Got my variables, I got my algorithms. It's all very logical and deterministic and straightforward. So debugging is where did I mess up the logic? And for AI tools, that really doesn't work anymore, because to some degree they're stochastic, and to some degree they're also very different architectures, neural nets, than traditional software. And so the correct way I found, when you debug an agent that doesn't quite do what you want it to do, human temptation is to either be logical with it or shout at it. I am disappointed that you don't give me the result. And then these things are built to please. So it comes back and, oh yes, you are so right. I am so sorry. And it falls on its sword like a knife in a Monty Python movie. And it's not very productive. And so what you need to do, I find, is you need to ask an open-ended question and saying, I expected to get X from you. You gave me Y. What happened? Why is this the case? And what in your context made you do that, and what can I then do in my prompt or my instructions for the agent to prevent this from happening? It'll tell you what it wants from you to become better. So I always compare it with, it's a bit like managing a junior associate, and all of a sudden the junior associate, who normally is brilliant, sort of screws something up, and rather than screaming at them, which again, one might be tempted, but it's not helpful. You go, I know you're always good, but this morning just didn't work. What happened? And then you get the, yeah, I went out partying last night and I got to bed at 5 in the morning and I'm still hungover. And at least that's if you have a good relationship with them. And then, maybe I should ask you that question in the afternoon, or maybe I should give you a coffee first before I ask you to do more work. And so old-fashioned management skills, I think, will be coming back into fashion when interacting with those tools. And then my final observation is, I was personally amazed at how good this stuff is as a coach. In hindsight, it's like many good insights. It's one of these duh moments, because of course it's really good with language. So why wouldn't it be good as a coach? But that's led us to some very interesting use cases with a view to the portfolio. And again, for the audience, don't think of it as a software tool in the traditional sense. Think of it much more as a coaching augmentation of human interactions in addition to cold hard logic.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks for those insights. I don't think I've talked to your AI like a mature adult rather than a stroppy teenager. I think is a great way to think about it. Easier said than done. You've mentioned the portfolio. So how are you finding AI adoption in Brightstar's portfolio companies?
And the answer is a little bit. It depends. Like why do economists have two hands? There's always one hand and the other hand. And like many things in private equity, it's a bespoke thing. So it's not a one size fits all. Give you an example. We have a government contracting business that specializes in IT and cyber solutions, among other things. Probably no one in the audience will be surprised that they didn't need Michael to help them with AI very much. And they built the tool that can tag 30 terabytes of unstructured data within less than an hour. And it works really good. And they're making good business off that. On the other hand of the spectrum, we have a roofing company, and roofers and people who work with roofers are not known to be AI natives. So what happened there was they were thinking about, should we add a night shift to our call center? Because, roofs don't only leak during working hours. And the question was, do we need that extra shift, which obviously comes with all sorts of implications. And so we looked at a vendor which helps them up setting up a virtual call center where they have an AI agent taking the call. Again, it's not brilliant, but it's better than nothing. And it improves all the time. And in the worst case, it queues a call back for the next morning, and the customer feels like they're being heard. And so it really varies by company and by company maturity. The one thing we're trying to do is be consistent in letting all our portfolio companies know what we got, so to speak, and encourage them to use AI. And then we're looking into putting our own agents into portfolio use cases and at some point into the portfolio C-suite. So one thing we're playing is we have a management coach that can explain and interact with the CEO about what does it mean to be a PE-owned firm. And that's often, as you know, and many of our audience will know, that's often a pain point, because CEOs have built a business. They're very opinionated, otherwise they wouldn't be CEOs. Now they have these new partners, and sometimes there's just a difference in priority. By nature, private equity firms look for investment returns. By nature, CEOs are operators. So you got the disconnect between the financial and the operational language. We try to bridge it. We think we're really good at it, but there are still these moments where a CEO goes, damn, why do I need to have this PowerPoint again, or this Excel spreadsheet, or this business case? And this tool is really good in being patient, because again, AI models are people pleasers, but explaining based on the knowledge base it has why that business case is important, and then help the CEO. Again, to take the interpersonal dynamics, if the CEO has that conversation with me, it's always, do I look stupid? There's always that little bit of insecurity in there. With this AI tool, the CEO can scream at it and go, I hate PE people, and they're just such a waste of time. No one will be any the wiser. The tool will patiently answer and still help him or her with what needs to be done. And CEO had the chance to vent their feelings, and the conversation therefore will be better when it actually happens. So that's another interesting use case. We have one that within half an hour benchmarks a website against competitors and gives web designers ideas on how to make it better. So it's a good efficiency use case, and we just think the upside is unlimited is a strong word, but the upside is very big. So give you and the audience a few numbers. There's estimates out by credible consulting firms. AI will generate 6 to 8 trillion in economic value globally. Middle market companies generally account for a third of GDP in the US and in Europe, and therefore probably around the world. And so it's not unreasonable. There's about 2 trillion a global upside in AI use cases. And so for a small PE firm like us, that essentially means the sky is the limit. And we love that. And then I alluded to this a little bit with the CEO use case. The barriers to knowledge have just come down dramatically, because I can give that CEO, don't have to send them to a 3-day Harvard Business School course of what does PE look for and what does it mean to be PE owned. I also don't need to give them 5 books to read. I can upload our knowledge on this, and then that agent is available to every CEO. And so it becomes super easy to transfer knowledge. And what used to be the realm of large corporates is now the realm of the middle market and smaller firms. And to us, that's super exciting. And I think to many small and mid-sized business owners, if there are any in the audience, that should be super exciting too.
Yeah, 100%. And in many ways, it appears that the kind of route to impact through AI in the mid-market is easier, dare I say easier than perhaps in other size organizations. So it is very exciting. And I guess to tie that together, and something you mentioned earlier was that I think the stats out there that 90% of AI projects fail. I don't get the sense that that's the case with Brightstar's portfolio companies. So I guess the question is, why do you think that is in terms of the stat, and what is it about Brightstar and your portfolio companies as to why you're seeing success?
Yeah, in a sense, I shouldn't say we're lucky, but we're at the sweet spot of change management in our world, because on the one hand, we work generally with smaller businesses than a Fortune 50 would be, where you've got a lot of entrenched interests, a lot of departments, silos, for all the good efforts that management does of these large companies. So I don't want to diss the Fortune 50, having worked in some of them myself. There's just structural barriers to rapid change, and you don't have that in the middle market, which we operate in, where companies are much more entrepreneurial, much more nimble. And so, number one, we're at the right intersection. So in a sense, the odds are stacked in our favor. But number two, and this I think is a message regardless of size, we're good at relationships and always have been, and that's one of our strengths. And you can't do change management without relationship skills. And this is not about the Borg will assimilate you and IT will march its inevitable march. This is all about people, and AI even more so, because you got all these anxieties. So strong relationships is the one success factor. The second one is playbooks to as much as we need them, and we have them from a small company size all the way through Fortune 50 because of some of our senior leadership and their experience. And then the last bit is it's very helpful, back to hopefully the message of this conversation, very helpful to roll up your sleeves and know the shortcomings of the models and the AI solutions. And so we don't have the AI as magic standpoint that often makes these things fail, because you have everything else in place. You have a very enthusiastic chief executive, you have an established change management team in a large company, and then they're trying to put a solution in place that the CEO has heard about. The marketing machine has worked, and it's, for argument's sake, yeah, now we all have to adopt Claude. And then at the grassroots levels, it's like, well, what does that mean? And that's when the effort stalls. Whereas we know we can apply AI for this, we can't apply AI for that. And so usually our use cases get traction quickly. And with the traction comes the moment, oh, this actually is good for my day job, so I will adopt it. So be good at relationships, be good at the change management aspect of things, and understand your models.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you. I'm going to ask Michael one more question, everyone, but then, because we've already run over time, it's been a great conversation so far, but then we're going to do Q&A probably in 2 or 3 minutes then. We've already had questions come in from Shiva, Peter, Sean, Todd, Philip, so thank you everyone for those, and we'll get to those, but if you've got questions, please ask them in the next 2 or 3 minutes, because we're going to go on to the Q&A very shortly, everyone. But just one final question then, Michael, on that. How do you measure return on investment then from these value credit?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. The answer is we don't really, and there's a bunch of really good reasons for it. The first one is, as I've spoken at length about this red team agent for the investment committee, we will know whether that red team agent is any good in probably 2 or 3 years in a tangible ROI type way, because the real proof is, will we be able to sell our companies with higher returns than we used to in the past? And so the A/B testing on these things is really difficult. And of course, we now think it's really good, but that's still just human judgment. That's not ROI. And so, number one, a lot of these use cases have too long a cycle time to do really ROI. Number two, because it's so easy to prototype and play, I'd much rather have our staff and those in our portfolio companies set up an agent in half an hour than spend half a day writing the business case and trying to figure out ROI. So that's, of course, a different story when it comes to multi-$100,000 vendor engagement, and there we become much more disciplined. But for the rapid prototyping, we just find it's so easy to do it. Let's not get stuck in bureaucracy. And so what we really do, rather than ROI, is what we say is, how big's the pain point? How big is the growth opportunity? And so if the pain point is we get stuck in groupthink and OIC conversation aren't as sparky and controversial and feisty as we would like them to be, that's when we go, let's have AI make a dent here. And so in my view, the technology isn't yet right for the Six Sigma approach. It's still too early days. So hence we're pretty relaxed on this.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating point as well for people to get their heads around, because it's funny how AI sort of flipped the script on ROI, which was really front and center in previous sort of tech transformations. So we're going to get on to Q&A now, everyone. So thanks for your questions. We'll start with Philippe, who's asked important. I think this refers back to something we were probably talking about near the start. He says, important statement indeed. It's important to know what you're doing. Hence the question, how did you increase your own capabilities to be well equipped and fluent to navigate the AI landscape? So I think he's referring to you personally.
I can handle that one. So I think it came down to two things. One is, I mentioned this earlier, just get your hands dirty. Get that $20 OpenAI or Claude or Perplexity subscription and play with it. And the second bit is then find like-minded friends, and we've done that well, and I'm lucky enough to have that done well through other chief strategy officers, but also through my technical background, through academics, through a network of people who play in the space. And my advice on this is find a lot of friends and make sure, like in many cases, that those friends don't try to sell you something. It's okay to talk to people who try to sell you something, but you need friends who can calibrate. And then between the experimentation and the network and the conversations at conferences, through LinkedIn, actually. That's how it all happened. And again, I will say, as much as I think I know what I'm doing, I still don't know where the journey's going. We're at such an inflection point with this technology that I think anyone who says, I know exactly what's going to happen in 3 years, is sort of BSing a bit.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks for your question, Philip. We've got a question from Sean O'Connor. How are you leveraging AI on the sourcing origination front?
So I would say carefully is the answer. And that's partly because we're not a VC, where as I said earlier, a lot of the businesses we buy have what we call digital exhaust. So currently AI is pretty good when you're looking at businesses that have a lot of internet presence. You can look at web stats, you have available data. In our case, very often that trailer manufacturer, you don't even know how many employees it has outside in. You certainly don't know the revenue, you don't know the profit. You kind of know it makes trailers, but that's not good enough. And so what we're finding is AI becomes really good the moment we have a conversation and we have some information, but for outside in code sourcing, it's not yet as good as a conversation with people. We're very heavy in what we call centers of influence. So we like to get to know the financial advisor, the accountants, the people that are close to the companies we want to buy. And we're using AI and data analytics and understanding, for example, in St. Louis, Missouri, who is the accountant that has the most relationships with the businesses that we're interested in. That works. But the holy grail of, and I know there's a lot of vendors out there that promise to really support the sourcing process. And I think they're really good if the businesses have digital exhausts and there is information available. For us as a firm, where the data availability is so sketchy, and often the revenue number is 10 years old, so you might as well not look at it, and it's dangerous if you do. AI isn't yet strong, but like everyone else, we're playing with sector scans, we're looking at fundamentals, we're looking at correlation of macro to subsectors, but proof is in the pudding. We haven't yet found an investment solely through AI. I think that's not true for the VC type firms who are in that sense more privileged than we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate your question. Todd has asked, can you say a bit more about how you trained your contrarian agent? Did you feed it from deals that failed versus successful? Did you feed it various financial models? What was the training material? Yeah, great question. Thanks, Sean. Todd, rather.
That's great. Yes, we did deals that, and we don't have that many that failed, so it wasn't a statistically relevant sample set, so to speak. But what we did was we fed it deals we passed on, we fed it deals that did well in our portfolio. And then what we also did was we did the historical backlog. So we then, after training it on a subset of the deals, we gave it some that it hadn't seen before. And where we knew then we had to change our value creation plan during the hold period because something we overlooked. And we saw if it picked that up, and then back to the way of working with it. When it didn't pick it up, we went where we would have expected you to pick that up. What do you need in your knowledge base to not forget about that angle in the future? So it was quite an iterative process, but exactly as you said on the SIMs, and on, more importantly, on the investment committee materials. Financial models we didn't do for two reasons. One is we're not really looking for it to give input to the financial model. We're looking for it to give input to, is cyclicality an issue here? Is our macro factors that we're not looking at an issue? Is the industry dynamic an issue? So one is financial models isn't really what we wanted to look at. And number two, financial models are a pain because they have a lot of information, and if you think of these agents, they only have a limited amount of brain power in the moment, technically known as the context window. And if you feed them too much information in one go, you're overwhelming that context window, that brain in the moment, and then your output deteriorates. And so we try to be judicious with what we give it. And if Todd, if you want to, that's true for everyone in the audience, you know where I live on LinkedIn. So if you want to ask follow-ups on this outside of this conversation, happy to engage.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Great question. Got a question from Peter Sloan, who asks, it seems easier to manage risk within Brightstar Capital Partners versus portcos. How do you manage data security risks at the portco level when encouraging playing around, i.e. shadow IT, individuals using AI tools and agents on their work computers, potentially giving access to company data, etc.? Great question. Thanks, Peter.
Great question. That's where the famous AI policy comes in. And I think there's actually not, from a policy perspective, there's that much difference. So our policy within BCP is very clear. You can only use confidential information on a firm-approved platform. And if you don't, that's a compliance breach with the predictable consequences. And I think that principle is true for us, and it should also be true for a portco. It should be true for any organization. That's basic information security. Now, the shadow IT is the interesting thing. And we found in our policy, we made a conscious effort to say, you can never leave the company-approved platform. But, and this is now the trick, we will do as much as we can to help you find the platforms that work for you. And so as part of when we rolled out the policy, we said, never, ever, third rail, use confidential information outside the company platform. But if you want to encourage, if you want to play, if we're on OpenAI and you play with Gemini, if you do it with non-confidential data, you do it at home and then come back with your experiences, talk to our head of IT. At Brightstar, it's easy because we're a small firm, and we'll evaluate it. And if enough of you say Gemini is really good, we're not going to be bastards about it. We're going to include that in the firm-approved platform with the right guardrails around it. I think at a portco level, the same principle should hold. The IT policy needs to be a little bit more open with, you can do this with task forces, with champions group, with whatever the right appropriate organizational mechanism is, to get that feedback of tools that work and that can then be brought under the umbrella. So I think more than with traditional tools, you have to have more of a two-way street between IT and the rest of the organization, where IT listens to the rest of the organization for new suggestions. But then, because if it's a rigid wall, shadow IT will grow. People are funny creatures. They don't like to be boxed in. But that said, there has to be a firm line at the corporate level that says, look, we're listening to you. There is a two-way street here. But if you're naughty, we will slap your wrists pretty badly, because being naughty means, particularly in this day and age, huge vulnerability to the company, particularly with AI tools. So that's my answer. It's, on the one hand, it's really simple. Have really good policy, encourage a two-way street, and then enforce the policy really hard. In practice, of course, that varies by size and organizational culture.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Peter, for the question. Question from Shiva here. On the topic of using AI to audit AI, do you use a checker agent to audit the maker's output? I'm curious how you ensure deterministic accuracy for EBITDA. Does the system perform a mathematical reconciliation against the raw source data? Curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Great question, Shiva. Thanks.
Wonderful. Now we're getting into the good stuff. So the answer is, our use cases don't yet really rely on deterministic accuracy for EBITDA, which is where we're different from a lot of the vendor solutions. So we're actually okay, but we have a checker running quickly. Here's the two documents, compare them, compare the numbers in particular, and that's easy to do. But we don't need 100% accuracy in our use cases, because we're big point, we're in the augmentation, not the automation business. And we're also in some degree happy when the numbers aren't always right, because we tell our associate, our VPs, our deal team members, you are never allowed to not review an AI output and then give it to the investment committee. And so in order for the human in the loop thing not to get lazy, it's a bit like when you see at airports, sometimes the checkers for dangerous substances get like a phantom thing on their screen, and if they don't pick it up, then they sort of get alerted. If there is never an exception, the human in the loop thing becomes lazy, and so we're actually quite okay with the odd number not being right. Now, that said, if you wanted to do it, it can be done. What you need to do is you go down the API route. You need to put your agent as part of an API call, and that API call happens from a deterministic model. And you then check the output of the agent against your spreadsheet, and if the output is wrong, then you send it back to the agent. Then that can be done. It's technically not terribly complicated. It's just more infrastructure headache than we need given our use cases.
Great, thanks, Michael. Thanks, Shiva. Great question. Michael and I can probably stay on for another 5 minutes, I'd imagine, if that's all right with you, Michael.
Yeah.
We've got two more questions to get through here, and if anyone still has a question, please do get it in now. This is really the last chance, and we'll try and get to it if we can. Nivesh asks, how is the AI team structured at Brightstar, e.g. central data science versus AI team inside portfolio ops, or dedicated AI unit with a defined playbook or some other structure? Great question. Thanks, Nivesh.
Yeah, so we have an AI team for the GP, which team is a strong word. It's me and a lady who's our head of internal AI and automation. And that team will get a little bit augmented depending on what we need. We then have operating partners that have AI knowledge, and that goes into the small to mid-sized businesses. And then we have an AI unit with a playbook that looks at the wholesale transformation. So we've had organization follow the use cases, and the way I always like to do it is with a marine analogy. So me and Eleanor, who is our head of internal AI and automation, me and her can drive a sort of 30-foot fishing boat. The operating partners can drive sort of 80-foot yacht, and the dedicated AI team can drive the super tanker. And we get deployed depending on the size of boat that's needed, and depending on the size. Super tankers and aircraft carriers, you'd be surprised. Everyone thinks they're going slow, but they're actually not that slow. When you look at their speed, it's just because they look they're so big, they look slow. And so the answer is we have all of the above, but again, we're a relatively small firm. So when you think teams, it's usually just a few people. It's not a corporate size team.
Yeah, which is kind of the nature of PE often, you'll find. This is probably going to have to be our last question. Peter Sloan has asked another one. Thanks, Peter. To what extent can AI materially reduce the time and effort required to make large proprietary data sets usable, particularly in fragmented multi-location businesses where data is historically messy and unstructured?
The answer is massively. And there's a whole sub branch of AI called retrieval augmented generation, RAG, and there's vendors that do that, and they're actually pretty good already. So The answer is yes. It's very helpful for unstructured large data. That's the one area where I would start doing a vendor bake-off, and I won't do too much infomercials, but there's one firm called Glean. That's a good starting point. They have competitors, so I would never go just with them and do a bake-off. But that problem, and that's partly to my earlier point on barriers to entry being reduced. I don't have to restructure all my data architecture into one coherent data lake. AI is really good with unstructured large data sets. So the answer is that's a really promising frontier.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Great question, Peter. One quick question to finish from me, actually, Michael. Going back to the bake-off, I guess, that you mentioned when we started, and the vendor bake-off, and you said that every vendor that you trialed had hallucinations on the numbers. And what I found interesting about that was then, given that, what was it that you were then looking for from the vendor post that as a potential partner?
Yeah, the answer there is you can't beat them into what they're not good at. It's just a human thing, and given that they put their best foot forward and the best foot still wasn't quite as good, we pivoted our conversation from, okay, so you're telling us that you can completely automate a SIM review, a pitch document review. And the answer is clearly you can't, because the numbers aren't quite right. So the question is, given that that's what you can't do, what can you do? And so our pivot was from forget about automation. It's just not going to happen for the next year or so until the models get better. But can you help us with being a platform where we can switch out models easily, underlying AI models? Can you integrate with the rest of our data infrastructure? And so we basically went, okay, so none of you, all of you have the same blind spot when it comes to the numbers. What can we partner with that's not the numbers? And that's always been, I think that holds not just in AI, it holds everywhere. If you find that your expectations of the world are not being met by what the world gives you, you got to change the expectations and figure out what you want from the world that's still useful to you, rather than trying to keep running down the same alley and always ending up at the same brick wall.
Yeah. I think our time is coming to an end, sadly. Thanks everyone for joining us. Much appreciated. The audience that joined us at the start has largely stuck with us throughout the hour, would you believe? And I think Michael, that's probably a testament to you. Thank you so much for all of your experience and insights. This hour, I think, is going to be hugely valuable. And I guess just to finish, I think you touched on it earlier. If people want to reach out to you, what's their best means and method of doing that? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn would be the best. So if you do LinkedIn search Michael Drexler, Brightstar Capital Partners, I show up. Unfortunately, my first and last name aren't unique enough to find me just with that. But if you add Brightstar, it should get me easily, and then just connect and I'll reciprocate, and then DM me, as we say in this wonderful new world.
Great stuff. Michael Drexler, Brightstar Capital Partners, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Data and AI Live. And we'll see you all on the next one. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.